It's nice to be here in person for a change.
Yeah, it's really nice. Can we be doing this in a couple more weeks? And I'm asking that in terms of the Delta variant. You have your eyes on so many different businesses. What do you see?
Well, I think the times have changed a little bit. We just saw the CDC issue the new guidance, and we're monitoring the Delta variant very, very closely. I'm still very hopeful that maybe after we get through August, things will improve. We have to drive the vaccinations up. We've gone through a full masking policy within Honeywell, and I'm hopeful that as we drive those vaccinations up, we're going to be able to get through this Delta challenge that's throwing us a curveball here.
Yeah, certainly is. Darius, good morning. It's Guy in London. And I'm going to add my thanks to Alex for you being in the studio. So fantastic to see this. You guys, you have a huge business that is embedded into hundreds of offices, thousands of offices around the world. So you've got a pretty good idea of what's happening with other businesses as well. What are you seeing with that side of the business? Are people coming back to the office? Do you expect people to come back to the office? Do you think more broadly, actually, there has been some sort of a structural shift in the way that we work?
Well, a couple of points. It really varies throughout our world. I mean, in China, most of our associates have been back for a long time. You know, there have been a few hiccups here very recently, but most of the people have been working from the offices. In the U.S., in contrast, we came back to a hybrid environment after 4th of July. Now we've kind of gone back to working primarily from home. So depending upon the country we're in, we really look at the data, we assess what's happening. We see the level of the spread, and we make decisions based on that are more data than emotional based. You know, in terms of longer term and how will this impact the workplace, I don't think I'm really ready to declare that. I know that a lot of people are making statements about this will happen, that will happen. I'm not really sure. And if we go back to, you know, if we go all the way back to 9/11, there were a lot of commentary about, well, people won't fly again and aviation is going to be impaired forever, but that's not really what happened. So I'm not really sure. We're going to kind of wait and see. We'd love to have some of our associates back in the offices soon, and we're only going to do that in a safe manner, but I'm not really ready to declare yet in terms of what's going to happen long term.
Darius, what about your clients and the businesses that you serve? I mean, companies that are going back, they're going to have different types of conference rooms. They're going to have different ways of checking in their health or vaccination status. What kind of business opportunity is there for you there? How do you see that changing?
Well, I think we do have substantial business opportunities. I mean, just to name one, our Healthy Buildings offerings, which we really launched last year. We booked about $100 million worth of business last year. We're going to book several $100 million. And, you know, and they're targeted the office environment, the educational environment, the hospital environment, so on, which really protect the occupants by having a superior filtration and air treatment system, which is really, as we all know, is the method for spreading the COVID. So I think that's, you know, it has created some opportunities for us. You know, we were kind of early in to respond to the crisis through our masks, expansion of capacity in the U.S. So there are some minuses. You know, warehouse automation, which is our fastest growing business, is expanding very, very quickly, because that is a trend that I think is going to sustain itself just because of the convenience it offers, and we continue to grow that business at mid-double digits. So it's, you know, there are some very, very favorable trends, and even some of our businesses that have been more challenges, like energy, like aerospace, we see those slowly getting better as well. And as we head into 22, 23, we anticipate an acceleration. So, you know, I think the worst is behind us. We're going to have a couple of challenges like with Delta, but we think that the world is going to solve this issue and emerge from it slowly.
Darius, let's spend a moment talking about aerospace then and what's happening in aviation. I want to talk a little bit about sort of flying cars and flying taxis and your kind of investment there. But first of all, let's deal with current technology. When do you think we go from a narrow body recovery, which we're seeing now, to a wide body recovery, i.e. global aviation starts to get back on its feet?
Well, I think wide body recovery starts happening a little bit more in 22 and even more so in 23. I mean, and it's going to be correlated to the rates of vaccinations throughout the world, because obviously wide bodies are primarily targeted at the international markets. But I can tell you, and speaking personally and speaking to a lot of my CEO colleagues, there's a lot of pent-up demand to get out and travel, whether it's to see our colleagues throughout the world or to see some of our customers throughout the world. And to be honest, I can't wait to get on a plane again and fly overseas to visit our colleagues and customers. So I think when it is safe to do so, we're going to see a substantial acceleration. Frankly, just like we saw in aviation in the U.S., that a lot of the consumer have really carried the travel through the summer period, and it's been very robust. And the business aviation segment, which is also very important to us, I mean, it's already at 2019 levels.
Let's go from the kind of the long haul story to the super short haul story. You are looking to disrupt aviation. You are the kind of the big company out there that is making a huge bet in terms of electric vehicles, in terms of air taxis, in terms of drones making deliveries. Darius, I'm curious as to what the timeline looks like here. Sort of the expectation, certainly from people I'm talking to, is that this is still a way off, but you're making a big investment now. What are the regulatory hurdles? What are the technological hurdles that you've got to kind of jump through or jump over to get to the point where actually this becomes reality?
Well, first of all, this is kind of the way we run Honeywell. We make investments for the short term and long term, and we want to have a better company a decade from now than we do today. And one of the mega trends that we believe in and we think it is going to happen is aviation and the different way that aviation will take place. And if we think about our urban environments, I mean, they're already congested in terms of, the streets and traffic and so on, and we're getting a little bit of relief because of COVID, but nevertheless, it's going to be a challenge. So urban commuting, urban deliveries, and so on, we're going to need a different means to deliver packages, to get people movement, and we think that UAVs, UAMs are the solution to that. And we think that that trend is going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years. In terms of technology, the technology is already here, and we have a lot of it, whether it be actuators, electric motors, collision avoidance systems, aeronautics, all in a lower cost structure, much more targeted to the UAV market. I think the thing that's going to trail a little bit behind is we're going to need the right regulatory environment. But we think this is a bet worth making. And frankly, we've already secured over $3.5 billion worth of business in that segment. So we are, in fact, very bullish on it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So you're talking about urban air mobility and unmanned aerial systems when you refer to those acronyms. And I was going to say, you're putting a lot of money into it. When are you going to make a profit off of it?
Well, I think we're probably still 3 to 5 years in terms of the early entrance. And the way we see this is evolving is that initially it'll be cargo, packages, and so on delivery. Human movement is going to be probably closer to a decade. So that's kind of how we think that this thing is going to step through. But we see that happening today, which is some limited level of package, pharmaceutical deliveries, remote outposts. I mean, it has a really good utility beyond just the urban setting.
So two of your biggest businesses are aerospace and energy. Does this disrupt energy in essence? Because I'm not going to be driving my FedEx truck to go drop something off. I'll be using a drone. Does this disrupt it?
Well, I think to some extent it does, but our energy is a very, very broad play around, refining, petrochemicals, and even more important, a lot of our sustainability solutions. And, I think when it comes to some of the most important sustainability solutions for the future would be green hydrogen and blue hydrogen, plastics recycling, green fuels. I mean, we have all those technologies. Frankly, our disappointment was that, we've had these technologies for a decade or two, but no one cared. So it's only recently that we're getting a lot of interest that says, well, what do you have and how can we work with you to really change the energy footprint and drive recyclability of plastic? So, we don't mind disrupting ourselves because we have the next step in the evolution of many of these technologies.
When it comes to energy, though, and aviation fuels, hydrogen requires a complete rebuild in so many ways of the aviation infrastructure that we have at the moment. SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuels, don't. The issue, though, at the moment is scaling. What needs to happen, Darius, to make that scaling occur? Is it government policy changing the mix with diesel? What is it that needs to take place for these businesses to really get into gear, as you say?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I agree with you. SAF is going to be the step one in terms of the aviation fuels that we're going to need. We see that being used at LAX airport today. So it's here, it's viable, it works. We have the technologies to implement it. It is going to take a broader push from the regulatory environment, whether it's tax credits, whether it's incentives. We're very much aligned with a lot of that discussion that's taking place both in North America as well as Europe to make that happen. And eventually the world's going to move that. But like with any major change in terms of, it is going to require some level of regulatory push to drive that change. And again, it's just like what we talked about UAVs and UAMs. The technologies are there. They're just a little bit more expensive, and thus it's going to require some level of regulatory support to make it happen.
So which goes back to the whole, like, you've had green hydrogen for a while and that equipment, but no one cared. Let's go to cost and inflation. You mentioned resins, semiconductors, also transportation, barges, shipping as some of the higher costs. Here in the market, we're trying to get a handle on whether or not that stuff is transitory or permanent, and what transitory actually means. Can you help us with that?
Yeah, well, I wish I could, because
3 years, 18 months?
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm not sure that I really can say it's transitory or not. I mean, I think it's definitely pronounced, and we see it kind of whether it's semis or, as you mentioned, resins, transportation costs, all of that is up, and it's quite a challenge to manage the inflationary environment and then passing through on the pricing. Whether it's transitory or not, we really don't know. I'm not really sure. You know, one thing to keep in mind is that if we look at the world economic pattern, different countries, different regions will come out of this COVID period at different times. So, you know, the U.S., China was first, U.S., Europe is coming out of it. But when we think about regions like Latin America, you know, India is just starting to emerge from it. There's going to be a different pattern. And I think that, you know, given that the global economies are interlinked, I think we're going to be in this kind of bust kind of a setup. Now, what's different in the U.S. is that we've had quite a bit of stimulus launched into the economy, and at some point that may wear off, which is why the theory is that it may be transitory. So we'll see what happens, yeah. But I'm not, to be honest, I'm not really sure right now.
Darius, one final, just as a follow-up. Do you think the shift to a green economy, to net zero, will be inflationary?
I think in the short term it could be. We all know that the shift to, you know, what we call green energy is at current cost points, it's going to be higher. And you know, this is a key point that we have to be very mindful of, is that we have to transition to much more of this green energy in a very thoughtful way. Because if we try to push it too fast and move away from hydrocarbons too fast, and some of the oil and gas companies stop investing in hydrocarbons too fast, we could be in a very high inflationary environment, because we're going to be short on hydrocarbons and the green energy technologies won't be ready. And that is something else to really worry about, because then we could be in a very high inflation environment. So this has to be done gradually.